Te Dakota te whānau o Aotearoa Unitarians. Te Dakota nā manahiri, no mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui tōpā a te atua, te Dakota tēnā tātou katoa. This morning, I want to take time to reflect on an idea being debated around the world because of the conflicting ideas about how to respond to COVID. Freedom. Paul Stephen Dodenhoff offers these thoughts on the subject from our Unitarian Universalist perspective. The freedom to doubt, to question, to be content to live in mystery is central to our liberal religious tradition. Like the process of evolution itself, the path that we follow, our practice, if you will, is not easy or simple. It isn't without its dead ends or its disappointments. It doesn't guarantee that all our conclusions will be final or that we will ever find an answer to all our questions. But also, like the process of evolution, it is filled with great expressions of beauty and awe that are sometimes born of great struggle and at other times come as unexpected grace. If you have a chalice or candle to light, this fire is a reminder of the light within us all, the yearning for freedom, the longing for truth, the flame of intuition, the torch of conscience. We dedicate this service to the remembrance of this holy light. As I've mentioned recently, one of the things I'm enjoying about having Zoom services is looking for music that's not necessarily in our UU singing the living tradition to capture the themes of the day. The opening song I've chosen is entitled Stand Up, and it's from the movie about Harriet Tubman, who devoted herself to freeing slaves on the Underground Railroad. Unitarians were very active in the movement, including Transcendentalist Theodore Parker, who was instrumental in shaping who we are today. The reading I've selected today, it's going to tell you Unitarians a little more. It's about a Bible story. I know none of you know Bible stories, so it's time to break you in a little bit. And it's by John Nichols, and it's entitled I Am Who I Am. And he starts with a quote from the book of Exodus. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and bring them out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. He said, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, if I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. Nichols continues. Having fled from Egypt to escape punishment for killing a slave driver, Moses took up a quiet life of a shepherd. One day, while he was alone in the mountains, a bush burst into flames. He knew immediately that God was in the fire, for a voice told him that he would now stood on holy ground. God had seen the sufferings of the Israelites and told Moses to go to Egypt and plead with the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Moses wondered why the Israelites should follow him, of all people, and so he asked for a sign, a name that would give him credibility with him. God responded, I am who I am. What's in a name? Why do you ask for them? If someone tells you his name, he gives you a way to get his attention. He tells you something about himself and offers what could be the threshold of a closer relationship. He dispels some of the mystery of who he is and implies that he may give up even more of that mystery as your acquaintance deepens. The God, excuse me. The God of this passage is not going to do that, not then, not ever. Moses and the rest of us will have to get used to the idea that God is radically, mysteriously, and beautifully different from anything we can shape, control, or even describe. And that is how God remains free from being defined, and therefore not limited by us. We can only hope that once in a while, likely when we least expect it, we will find ourselves on holy ground. There may be no burning bush in those moments, but we will, as a result, become more sure of who we are and more confident of what we must do. God leads not by becoming more attractive or visible to us, but by becoming unavoidable. I am who I am, or as it's sometimes understood, I will be what I will be. The Israelites finally sought their freedom, not because they knew God would hold their hand, leading them safely past all dangers, and then making everything right, but because they believed they had to do it. Something finally unavoidable compelled them to leave the comparative securities of slavery for the freedom and terror of the wilderness. As it turns out, God's 5-word self-description really meant, I am who you must confront. When those confrontations arise, when we are asked to do what is difficult but right, something crucially important to our future integrity and happiness happens. We may recognize this, even if we don't understand why. At this point, I'd like to offer another song around our theme. It's called Circle Round for Freedom. He has a nice voice. What does freedom mean to you? Is the musing I latched onto for today. For we are hearing a lot about freedom these days. Brian Tamaki holding freedom rallies in the Domain, violating his bail conditions in the name of personal freedom. Protesters marching down Queen Street in Auckland and gathering on the steps around Parliament in Wellington, angry about lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Farmers clogging motorways from Auckland to Dunedin with their tractors, howling their objections to the government's electric vehicle rebate policy. And that's just in New Zealand. Major protests throughout Europe against the reintroduction of restrictions in response to another wave of COVID. Even in the land of the free, Trump encouraged insurrection against Congress in the name of freedom. Then there is the debate over whether people have the freedom to spread misinformation about COVID and vaccines on social media. The thing about freedom is that it is, after all, only a symbol. We read about freedom, dream about freedom, celebrate the idea of freedom, advocate and hope for freedom. But do ideas like freedom, democracy, public service, and public accountability still have the force that they had in times when they inspired a costly struggle against autocracy? Why might the ideas have lost that force, and how might they regain it? It is inevitable that inspiring ideas and words are hollowed out by the human failure to embody them in practice. As a result, they become tainted with hypocrisy. The language then becomes uninspiring and loses its force to unify people. The fate of Christian words certainly reflects this process. One of the most sacred words to describe the Christian life is charity. In its origins, it embodies the response of the warm, self-sacrificing, universal, and astonishing love of God for each human being. Yet its evisceration can be seen in the popular saying, as cold as charity. The origin of this phrase lies in Jesus' prediction of a time when people's charity will grow cold. But in its later usage, the coldness is seen to mark charity itself. It characterizes people who act out of duty, but without feeling. They may speak of charity as their motivation, but their behavior reveals hypocrisy or brutality. This corruption especially affects words originally denoting a tender care for people. Places that offered protection to people in need were called asylums. The word came to represent harsh places to which people were dispatched in order to protect the general populace. Similarly, places for people who were mentally ill were named after Bethlehem, the place where Jesus was born and cared for by angels. The word was shortened to Bedlam, a place of disorder where devilish behavior abounded. Mary Magdalene, the biblical character, then considered to have been a repentant prostitute who wept over Jesus, became associated with sentimental tears and lives on in the word maudlin. The same loss of a high and inspiring meaning and its corruption into something unattractive is more general. We may think of penitentiary, originally conceived as a place where people could turn their lives around, and now synonymous with a harsh and punitive prison. Other Christian words that have often taken on a pejorative connotation are conversion, discipline, piety, purity, correction, submission, and humility. In each of these cases, values which were initially strong, positive, and humanitarian later came to be perceived as insipid, authoritarian, or even toxic. The change reflected the perception by others of the actual behavior and attitudes of people and institutions who claimed the values embodied in the words. Penitentiaries and correction facilities became places of punishment in which forced conformity with regulation was identified with conversion. Piety became associated with immaturity, conversion with fanaticism, purity with fear of sexuality, and submission with enslavement. These associations, of course, reflected in part prejudiced judgment by outsiders. They also reflected, however, the ways in which Christians' actions contradicted their words. The force for good of the tradition was lost, and its key words became stripped of their power to engage a community. This history has implications for our current situation. When reflecting on the continuing hold of ideas like democracy, politics, patriotism, freedom, and honor, we should ask about the associations these words have come to have. Democracy is generally seen as an ideal to be praised, but in practice is identified with politics. This has a pejorative taint. It's associated with dissimulation, manipulation, backroom, and sweetheart deals. Remote from the national interest, public service, and citizens' daily lives. Freedom is also an ideal, but it is often limited to individual freedom of choice with no entailment to the good of the society or a social bond. This is due to two totally different understandings of freedom. Those who are liberal-leaning and tend to think of freedom as an emancipatory ideal. Throughout history, the desire to be free inspired countless marginalized groups to challenge the rule of political and economic elites. Liberty was the watchword of the Atlantic revolutionaries who, at the end of the 18th century, toppled autocratic kings, arrogant elites, and slaveholders, thus putting an end to the old regime. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Black civil rights activists and feminists fought for the expansion of democracy in the name of freedom, while populists and progressives struggled to put an end to the economic domination of workers. While these groups had different objectives and ambitions, sometimes putting them at odds with one another, they all agreed that their main goal, freedom, required enhancing the people's voice in government. When the late Representative John Lewis called on Americans to let freedom ring, he was drawing on this tradition. But there is another side to the story of freedom as well. Over the past 250 years, the cry for liberty has also been used by conservatives to defend elite interests. In their view, true freedom is not about collective control over government. It consists in the private enjoyment of one's life and goods. But this perspective, from this perspective, preserving freedom has little to do with making government accountable to the people. Democratically elected majorities, conservatives point out, pose just as much or even more of a threat to personal security and individual rights, especially the right to property. As rapacious kings, they were as rapacious as kings or greedy elites. This means that freedom can best be served and preserved by institutions that curb the power of those majorities, or simply by shrinking the sphere of government as much as possible, preserving the status quo. How we sort out which meaning we pursue has to do with what is our truth. Let me share a brief parable. Long ago, a village boy was accused of throwing a stone at a classmate. When charged with his offense, he opened his innocent 8-year-old eyes wide and said, "I didn't do it. The devil did it. He pushed me with his tail." There is an old English saying, so old that 16th century preacher Hugh Latimer himself mentioned it as being old in his time. Tell the truth and shame the devil. In this incident, the devil was not shamed, but blamed, and the child had not told the truth. Statesman and philosopher Francis Bacon, also in the 16th century, is probably most famous for his collection of essays, one of which is called Of Truth. The opening of the essay has always been very quotable. "What is truth?" said jesting Pilate, and would not stay for an answer. How wise jesting Pilate was, for even then the question of the nature of truth was a thorny one. And Bacon was under no illusions about the limitations of human nature. He thought that most people had a natural, though corrupt, love of the lie itself, and that a mixture of a lie doth ever add pleasure, in his words. It seems that Bacon was right then and right now. But the attitude towards truth has changed. Now we accept the idea that there are different sorts of truth. The phrases historical truth, narrative truth, and emotional truth come trippingly off the lips. Then there are the complex notions of fantasy and fiction. We have long subscribed to the notion of novelists making out various lies or fantasies in order to tell underlying truths about human nature. But we also have to accept, I think, that a gentleman's word is no longer his bond. The pious used to intone the biblical warning regularly. Be sure your sin will find you out. I've always assumed this meant that your secret wrongdoing would not remain secret forever. My more light-hearted mother used to refer to what she called the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not be found out. During an interview on television, a certain political leader made an effort not to be found out when asked what his favorite lie was. "I never lie," came the facile reply. "That's my favorite one too," riposted the interviewer, quick as a flash. So, being truthful to yourself, what does freedom mean to you? Before answering, do you agree with Bacon's idea that the candle lights of lies are more attractive than the naked daylight of truth? Or do you agree with his final thought that the knowledge and belief in truth is the sovereign good of human nature? If the latter, it will set you free. I offer this meditation by Teresa Soto. To be free, you must embrace the breadth of your own existence without apology, even if they try to take it from you. You must know not that you can do whatever you want. You are not a kudzu vine eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your own lush life. You must know instead that inside you are entire universes, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight for the entire universes inside of everyone else. Being free is not a license, but a promise. I'll let you consider all those thoughts as you listen to Hymn to Freedom, written by Oscar Peterson. My closing words are by Paul Beatty. May our lives be blessed according to the depth of our love, the persistence of our faith, our willingness to forgive and be compassionate, and in proportion to our yearning to be free. And now let's extinguish our chalice or candle. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Okay. I'm going to send you off to discuss what does freedom mean to you.